Mr. Andrade.
My name is Erik Andrade, and the reason I'm concerned about the property taxes and the tax assessment in our city is because the system is not fair. The system by design is based on market value, and the market is based on the will of people with capital to either purchase homes or have interest in homes. In particular, when we look at the assessment of property value in communities, the same house, same style, owned by different people in different communities, historically by the market has been defined differently. So when you have a real estate market that's defining value of homes based on who's willing to pay for that home and what that neighborhood looks like. So in particular, we could look at this community that we're in right now. This is a historic African-American, Caribbean, St. Helena, and Native community. And as such, the property value of a house built the same year, with the same wood, with the same materials, and even maybe the same architect and construction company would have a different value than a home that was built on Hawthorne Street, based on nothing but discrimination in the market. So when we have a system, when we have a tax system that's based on taxes are supposed to be for a public good, to make sure that everyone is participating and we have resources to have a common wealth, that we take this wealth in our community and put it forth to the needs of the community. When it's based on a system that is already unfair, what you're going to get is a system that's unfair by design. So part of our problem is not so much is the design itself is flawed. The design as it is set up that the free market, the capitalists in the market can influence the value of the home. So for example, we're in a community right now where there's people buying homes at $50,000 to $60,000 above the market rate. That's going to increase the property value in these homes, and we're already facing gentrification, in particular in our communities. Our communities have been harmed by the assessment of our homes in the sense that many homeowners were not able to pull out equity to fix their homes if they had an issue with their roof or they wanted to send their kids to school or college. Because of the value was devalued because of the community they came from and who they were, they didn't have that. And now these same communities, because people are coming in and buying homes at a rapid rate, are going to face the brunt of that taxation. So the services ain't changed, your income hasn't changed, but this system is designed so that those that have access to capital can survive in a system where the market value is going up by the capital and the interest in the community. So this is a harmful system that is harming our community, and we need to have protection for community members so that they're not pushed out of our community by rising interest in communities, and then the gentrification is affecting the home ownership and the rental, but also this property tax and this assessment of this year is going to be really problematic.
With the expected railroad completion, manufacturing, and waterfront development, communities are concerned with gentrification. What is your perception of this, and how will the assessor's office assist our community? In what ways?
I think that this is a huge problem. This is a really, really big problem that we're facing right now in terms of the displacement of community. We heard a lot of issues in the city council debate about the impacts that has on our community and what it does to people and what we're facing, whether it's in the homelessness that was spoke about and the single parent homes that people are living outside of their homes, that this increase in property tax liability is pushing people that have a limited income into a situation where they're not able to afford to pay their taxes. And as the rail comes in, the way that the system is designed currently is that if wealth comes into a community, your property value, your income didn't change, your size of your house didn't change, but now you're going to be taxed because of something that came in is changing the perceived value. It's perceived. The space hasn't changed, but the perceived value changes, and now you have a lot of elderly people in a community that are on a fixed income because they're retired. You have a lot of people that have limited income. Someone said that the average income in the city was $20,000. Now, if the property tax goes up and you're not a homeowner, the rent goes up. So we as renters are paying taxes. A lot of time, often we hear people who own homes labeling the taxpayers as only the homeowners. But homeowners that are renting out homes, they're renting it out for profit. It's a profitable business. And as these rails come in and as more people come into the community, If we don't have protections set up, then this tax, which is supposed to go for a public good, is going to do a public harm, because it's going to harm elderly people, it's going to harm people with low income and fixed income, and they're not going to be able to afford to live in the community that they may have spent generations creating and paying taxes on.
So obviously,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Obviously, I'm not looking to displace families with speculators coming into neighborhoods and causing these values to arbitrarily increase. As the assessors, we can't predicate who comes in and buys properties. We can't tell people who to sell their properties to or at what price. So unfortunately, there's nothing in the state laws that allows us to make adjustments to the property tax valuations for family neighborhoods or historic neighborhoods, the makeup of those historic neighborhoods. I've grown up in my grandparents' house growing up. I lived on the 3rd floor, they lived on the 1st floor. My husband and I live in his parents' home. So I do believe in, the family, gentrification and family home. There's not a lot as the assessors that we are allowed to do unless we go to state legislator. It's not in the laws to be able to make changes arbitrarily.
I'm sorry, I should have told you that during the question period, it will be limited to 2 minutes on the answers.
Okay. I'm sorry if I went over.
Okay. Ms. Saunders, do you plan to meet often with city residents, or do you meet often with city residents, for instance, at neighborhood meetings, to explain how valuations work? Because I'm sure people call the office and say, my taxes are going through the roof. Why is that? So do you do some of that?
We have done neighborhood meetings in the past, and I've attended those. I don't think that we have since this COVID. But if anybody calls, I'll be more than happy to explain anything to them. We just haven't had we haven't gone to any neighborhood meetings in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I believe it's a really important conversation that needs to happen on a wider level. And as Ms. Saunders was saying, it is a fact that this is set by the Department of Revenue, and I think that what we really need to do to change the way our society is one of the first things is we have to change the consciousness around the system. The system is flawed as is, and that we really need to address the flaw and get that education out there, and then advocacy is a strong thing. As Mr. Burgo was advocating, that you may not have the ability in the role of an elected office to do something, but you also have the ability to use that platform to push an agenda. As she had pointed out, that would be at the state level and addressing it at the Department of Revenue as well. And this is something that wouldn't just be going to them. It would have to be something that would go outside of just our city residents, but also other communities. But in regards to our public community, I think it's very important that they're made aware of what's going on, how it works, what's flawed in it, because I think that the big thing is that people don't understand how flawed the system is. And then also where there are ways and means to mitigate the effect of the raise in the tax rate, that families need to know that those options exist. In particular, I know that they exist for folks of elderly folks, senior citizens, but we also have to think about families, working families of people on a fixed income. There needs to be some kind of cap on the amount that the rate is raising for people. And we got to do that through educating people.
Even though the assessor's office doesn't have any power, according to the charter, to address issues like gentrification, is there something, because of your knowledge of property values, that an assessor could do to recommend to the policy-making bodies like the city council, or I guess changing the charter, to address gentrification?
Everything that we do as the assessors is really based off of the state law. That's Mass General laws for all of the cities and towns of Massachusetts. So I'm not quite sure that any of the city council could actually change those laws. I'm not quite aware that they could.
Well, the same thing. Could you advocate to the state legislative delegation from New Bedford to try to change the laws?
I don't know how. I mean, we haven't. I guess we could reach out to them if I just don't know the process that would take, because it's really predicated. Everything is based off of the state law, Mass General laws. So it would have to be through the state legislature to make those changes. So we could go that direction. I'm not quite sure that's the role of the assessor, but we could, give as much information as we could to provide that support to make that decision. But that would be out of our hands.
I think that we have the ability, whether we're in the seat where you are sitting at, or the seat here, or the seat in City Council, to advocate and create change. And it's about a slow process, unfortunately, with change. But when we're faced with crises, with a crisis comes opportunity, and we're in a crisis point right now already. And with the assessments that are going on right now, and when they come out, you're going to see an increase in the property value for many folks, and you're going to see a lot of people squeezed even further than they are now. So it's really important, despite the fact that it may not be that position in title and job description. In fact, I struggled to find a job description online for the assessor's office, and I went to the office. They didn't have a job description there, but I ended up running into an assessor as they were doing an assessment, and they were informing me that the model, and when he explained the model, it was apparent how flawed it is. You live next door to Mr. Phillips. Mr. Phillips paints his house. Your property value is going to go up based on the formula that uses the proximity to wealth to address you. So if we have a commonwealth where we're thinking about, we collectively pool our wealth together for the betterment, for the education, for the infrastructure of our community, if the way that we're assessing that wealth is actually harming people, then it's not really doing a service to the people of the community. It's harming the people in the community. So there really needs to be a change, and that change has to happen on a state level. We've had people in our city advocating for this in the 80s. I saw articles written in the 80s where they were talking about switching from a property tax value to an income tax, and then also having a commuter tax instead of this model of property tax, which was extremely flawed. And there's several people across the country have been advocating for different models. So I think that this is something that we need to push this idea forward. And also, with what is there, we have to find the gaps that protect people that are in a fixed income that can't afford it. Because now all of a sudden your taxes go up $300, $200 a month. You can't afford it. You get behind. Someone can purchase your liability and then charge interest on that. So this is a way that gentrification happens also.
I've witnessed firsthand individuals coming in from out of the country, purchasing a home and leaving New Bedford residents in the state of homelessness. If you have the opportunity, or I should say, are you willing to go to state legislature to make appropriate changes for our citizens? And if so, what would that look like, and what would you be advocating for?
I've already started to do that. I spent a lot of time last year advocating for some housing bills around the lift of rent control and other issues in advocacy at the state level. So that's something that is crucial in this in particular, and it's something that I'm going to do whether I'm in this position or out of this position. But it's clear that we really need to address at the root, which is the Department of Revenue, and how we're defining the model and the formula that they're using. Because if you're using a broken formula, no matter how well-intentioned you are, the system is flawed from the beginning. So that flaw is harming people, and we need to get out there ahead of this. This needs to change like yesterday.
Okay, so with regards to what people are paying for taxes, ultimately it's partly based off of the budget of the city. For instance, hypothetically, if we cut everybody's values in half, the tax rate's just going to double. Everybody has to pay the same, we're going to have to still come up with the same amount of taxes to cover the spending of the city. So I know that you're referencing the flawed calculation or whatever. That's just coming up with the values of the property across the city of New Bedford. Ultimately, in order to reduce everybody's taxes, we have to reduce spending. So I'm not quite sure where, we can certainly, go to the legislator, and if the rules get changed, we would have to follow them, and we would follow them. It's just, right, in order to cut taxes, though, we really have to cut the spending of the city. So that's the ultimate, issue here.
How many hours per week do you spend on city business in City Hall? Oh, and you may spend some time outside City Hall on city business too.
Right, because right now we're doing.
In general,
right now we're doing everything through Zoom meetings still. So it varies depending on the time of year. So right now it's a slow year. We haven't. There's not a lot of. Abatement applications that we have, so it's probably only a few hours a week. There have been other weeks where it's a lot more. We do a lot, some communications. We get the information to review ahead of time, but we haven't had a lot of abatement applications recently to really spend reviewing.
Mr. Andrade, I'm sure you'd say you'd spend all the hours you need to spend to do the job. So.
From what I was told when I went to the office, they said it was a 20-hour a week expectation, but it clearly is probably predicated on what the workload is. But that's what the assumption I had was it was a 20-hour a week position. That's a question that I couldn't answer because I'm not in that position at this point in time.
So this is a philosophical question which you wouldn't normally ask in an assessor's race, but I think this year, because of the issues that are being raised on gentrification, I would ask, isn't there an argument to be made that gentrification is a good thing for the city, especially a city like New Bedford? It brings in professional people who are going to spend money, maybe create jobs, fix up property. Isn't there an argument that some gentrification is good?
I do agree with what you're saying. I think that.
I'm not taking a position, I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, I think it is good with regards to people coming in from, new communities. Like I said before, I'm not looking for people to get displaced out of a neighborhood. We can't really tell people who to sell their property to, who not to, but having people come in from out of town and, do significant renovations to properties that have been, just kind of not been taken care of over the years, that is a good thing for the city. Unfortunately, it does ultimately, bring up values in that neighborhood. However, again, the ultimate taxes that you pay are really based off of the city budget and the spending of the city.
So how do you control a little bit of it?
How do you control?
It's possible to have a little bit of gentrification, but not too much.
Having new blood come into neighborhoods is actually a good thing. The concern is what he's bringing up, that some people are going to be hurt because their taxes are higher. Again, so we need to kind of go to the city council and the mayor to try to control the spending of the city to kind of cut the taxes.
I think that there's in our society, outside of just cutting the spending, because we could probably, in my mind, find ways to tax differently. that would meet those needs. So, for example, an income tax that may resolve that problem. That's something that could be looked at. Also, as was said by someone was Linda Morad was talking about nonprofits. We have institutions like in Massachusetts. We have a lot of profitable educational institutions that have endowments in the billions that bring in a lot of use into the public works and the needs. BCC and University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth, institutions that are adding on to the burden in our community. And those institutions are a little different from the Harvards, which are in a very different situation, but these things are things that I think that we really have to really relook at. And we also have other institutions, but that's a radical change that would take a lot of time to change. And I think that gentrification is a very harmful thing. I think that, like, if you're a gardener, if you plant plants and you transplant plants and you take them out the soil, you'll see the harm that happens. And the most healthy ecosystems are the systems where the roots in the systems are deep. And what we have in this community is we have communities that may not have economic opportunity because they've been locked out of opportunity. So we're dealing with a disparity and discrimination and a lot of things that have created the situation where some homeowners have not been able to upkeep their home simply because their property value has been devalued. They haven't been able to access equity. They haven't been able to been supported by these banks. They've had predatory loans. They've had all these harmful years of history, and these communities have bared the brunt of that for 400, 500 years. And now, with this redevelopment coming into our communities, and with a lot of the development really interested in the downtown area that abuts our communities, a lot of communities that are marginalized people of African indigenous descent are being harmed by gentrification in a way that it destroys the fabric of a community. And when you do that, there's something special that's really lost. And I think that we can't think gentrification is something that's good.
What are the most important issues or challenges that will face the assessor's office this year or the foreseeable future? And how would you address those challenges?
I think the issue we've talked about most of this time is that in this last year, we have prospectors and folks from outside of our community buying at homes at alarming rates above the market value. We have homeowners being targeted with letters that don't even have the homes up for sale. There's so much interest in that this market value is going to go up dramatically, and that this is a serious impact that's going to happen. Once these assessments come forward in January that they've been assessing, you're going to see an increase in the rental rates. You're going to see an increase in the bills that folks have, and that's going to, a community that's already struggling with COVID, was already struggling with historic unemployment, historic underpaid employees, are going to be pushed even further. And if we think that the situation where people are complaining about homelessness downtown, people fail to look at the things that are pushing people out of their homes outside of just the stigmas that are put out there that people are addicts and such. And some of that addiction is pushed by folks being pushed outside, and then they're in the cold and they're drinking liquor to keep themselves warm. So this property tax valuation and how this is done is a major issue. It has been an issue. If we look back and how historically it's harmed our community, you're going to see that there's a long history of how it hasn't really benefited everybody.
So again, the whole process of assessing the values of the properties starts pretty much in January. We're looking at 2 years worth of sales. The fact that the sales prices, people are paying a little bit more for properties now than what they were a couple years ago, it will factor into the calculation of the assessed values because we're looking at them over a 2-year span. However, the ultimate tax that you're paying is really going to not change unless the budget changes. So if the property values increase, the tax rate is lowered. Ultimately, the two combined equals the budget. It equals enough to cover the spending of the budget. If the property values decrease, a few years back when we had that, crisis, then the tax rate increases, the two combined still have to cover the city spending. So ultimately, where all of the values are increasing, but ultimately the overall amount that you're going to pay for taxes is still ultimately determined by the budget. And in order to decrease those taxes, we need to have, if people are concerned, they should go to the city council when they're creating the budget and, voice their opinion at that point. Again, the values go up, the tax rate goes down. Ultimately, we're going to pay the same.
All right, it's time for the closing statements here. If we could have, getting a little short on time, so a minute or so. Why don't we start with Mr. Andrade?
My name is Erik Andrade, and I'm running for tax assessor in the city of New Bedford. Our major concern is the style in which and the formula that is used to assess the property values in our community, and also making sure that our families in our communities understand the ways in which the tax values are set, and also ways in which they can apply if they're senior citizens. And also, I want to look into other options of how we could have a different tax model and advocate on a statewide level for our community. I'm somebody that is not afraid to look at something and say it's flawed, and that if it's flawed, then we need to advocate and we have to change consciousness around it and we have to organize around it. I have a history of organizing. I have a background in computer science. I don't have a tax background, but I took differential equations and calculus and all kind of math, and I'm a fast learner. But also, I think that my goal would be to be an advocate for our community and a change.